everyday emotion as millions just disappeared from sight.
Every evening, nobody knew what's going to happen to him, because the individual means nothing. The individual is like a piece of sand in the big, big desert. You can run it over with a truck, you can step on it, you can crash it, it just means nothing.
Yet Comrade Stalin seemed to remain above the fray. He blamed the terror on an overzealous police force and would periodically purge the head of the secret police. And they weren't just killed, they were erased from all official memory.
I'll tell you, even my grandfather, who was the victim of Stalinist repressions, he was able to survive, and she did not complain about the Soviet power or even about Stalin. He thought that the local leaders, the local bosses were to blame.
It's a very strange situation, the role that Stalin played in the lives of people in the Soviet Union. At the same time that he was evil and terrifying, he was secretive enough about it that I'm not sure that people, until much later, associated what was actually happening with the person of Joseph Stalin.
But one person did. His wife, Nadezhda, had learned about the famine from students returning from the Ukraine. She and Stalin began arguing frequently. One night at a banquet at the Kremlin, Stalin started flicking cigarettes at her across the table. She stormed out of the room and was found dead of a gunshot wound to the head the next day.
What we don't know is whether she retreated to their apartment in the Kremlin and shot herself to death, or whether there was a fight and he killed her. We don't know. People who hate Stalin greatly in Russia believe he killed her. People who still find some reason to say positive things about Stalin believe she committed suicide, and after that, as they say, his heart turned to stone.
Nadezhda's death severed his last link to reality. He had seen enemies everywhere for so long that he could no longer recognize a real one. In Germany, Adolf Hitler was creating a society as inhuman and repressive as Stalin's Soviet Union. And while the Nazis and the communists professed to hate each other, in reality, a grudging admiration existed between their leaders.
Stalin personally admired Hitler, the way how he manipulated with the people, how he got convert millions of Germans. So he was sometimes even watching him and trying to use his experience. When, for example, in '34, Hitler eliminated the commander of the SA troops, Ernst Röhm. And when Stalin got to know about that, he told to his colleagues, he said, look at Hitler, what a bright guy, you know. He shows us how to deal with political opponents.
In 1938, Hitler took Austria. By March of 1939, all of Czechoslovakia was occupied by the Nazis. Stalin knew he had to ally with someone. He had earlier approached the West, but Germany seemed like a better bet. They could offer him territory, the Baltics and half of Poland, and peace, at least temporarily. So in August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact. Hitler would soon betray his new ally and bring the Soviet Union to the brink of disaster. In the summer of 1940, the German takeover of Europe seemed unstoppable. As the Nazis marched up the Champs-Élysées, Hitler started thinking that Russia might fall just as easily as France. It soon seemed clear that Germany would attack, but Stalin couldn't believe the Fuhrer would go back on his word. But on June 22, 1941, Nazi troops crossed into the Soviet Union. The foreign minister, Molotov, confirmed the news to Stalin.
And when Molotov came to Stalin's office and told it, and Stalin just lost his speech. He could not even speak. He just sat down and was silent for some time, because here he understood how Hitler practically tricked him, how he misjudged, Hitler.
The misjudgment was monumental. In a month, German troops were 100 miles from Leningrad. Smolensk fell on July 16th. At a meeting of the Politburo, Stalin moaned, "All that Lenin created, we have lost." Most of the military command was gone, since Stalin had killed them during the purges. So at first, he made decisions himself, with often disastrous results. Kiev was overrun in September, and his advisors begged him to evacuate the doomed city, but he refused, and over 500,000 were either killed or taken prisoner, the largest single loss of the war. Ever searching for a scapegoat, Stalin blamed the prisoners themselves.
Well, he declared that all POWs were in fact traitors who weren't allowed to be taken prisoner. And when they got back, they were sent to labor camp, most of them.
When his son by his first marriage, Yakov, was taken prisoner, the Nazis approached Stalin about trading him for some of their own. Stalin said he had no son by that name. Yakov was shot and killed when he ran toward the barbed wire fence at the camp.
To alter the country, he gave his son as a sacrifice. He could not have acted otherwise. If he returned his son, the ordinary people at the front and at home, what would they have said of him? Look at him, he saves his own son. And what about our sons of fathers and mothers? Even theoretically, Stalin could not have done it, because he was Stalin. For him, the state was the most important thing in his life.
By October, the Germans were perilously close to Moscow. Preparation began to move the government to Kuyabyshev, 500 miles away. But Stalin decided to stay, even attending a parade in Red Square on November 7th. These tanks drove right past the commander-in-chief to the front line, just 25 miles outside the city. The Soviet troops fought valiantly, and the Russian winter began to cripple the German forces, freezing fuel lines and cutting off supplies. In the end, the Nazis couldn't solidify their gains. Stalin also